Welcome, everybody. This is Professor Spears at Ivy Tech Community College, chair of the Human Services Program at the Valparaiso campus. And I'm really excited because after putting out the teaser that we did last week, we've gotten some attention and people interested in being guests and telling their stories. And I actually had to put some time into thinking, who do I want to be my first guest for the first real live episode? And Racheal is a wonderful person who I think her story is going to be very inspiring to you on many different levels. So I did invite Racheal to be my first guest, and she was kind enough to accept. So, welcome, Racheal. And we'll just go ahead and get started. I've got a series of questions, but I want this to be conversational. So if there are areas that I don't ask about specifically that you would like to talk about, feel free. This is your story, and we're sharing it with our audience. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so why don't you start off just kind of giving us the story of Racheal? So tell them the story of your journey. I won't tell too much of your story. I'll let you do that yourself, but you did start off as a single parent, and I'll share the ending. She finished and she has a master's of social work, and she's getting her leg up on a much better career than she has had in the past, and I'm so proud of her. So with that, Racheal, if you would tell us about you and what you've been through, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, so I did, as Don said, I started as a single parent. I had my son when I was 19, going on 20. I enrolled in college at that point, and I had to quit one semester in because I couldn't afford to not work and take care of my son. And I didn't have time to go to school and do the schoolwork and take care of him, so I quit. I waited. I had my daughter about 5 years later. I tried to go back after I had my daughter. At that point, I was working cleaning houses and commercial buildings and things like that. So it was kind of hard labor, but at that point, I was still young, so it didn't really affect me in the way that it did as I got older. So after I had my daughter, I did try to go back to Ivy Tech. I did go back and I tried nursing, like all the nursing things, and realized that nursing really wasn't for me. And at the same time, I could not afford daycare. I couldn't afford daycare to go back to school. I couldn't miss work. I had to work and take care of my two kids because I was still a single parent. And so I quit again. And so I continued to work like cleaning houses and commercial buildings and things like that. I had to eventually I split up from my husband at the time. We were not married very long, and I had to go on food stamps, and I had to get help with insurance for my kids because we did not have insurance. So I had to get my kids on Medicaid. And I was working full time to pay for daycare, to pay for everything that I needed to have for them because it was just us we were living in Section 8 housing. I lived there since my son was 2 and until my daughter was probably 7 or 8. And we were able to move out of subsidized housing with the help of some others that were really, really great to me throughout like that whole process. They knew that we were kind of in a bad spot and needed to get out of that spot. So they helped us, get into the house that I'm in now. So I'm really grateful for them. It was here at the house that I'm in now that I kind of started getting I started getting back on my feet, and people were investing in me, and nobody had done that before. Um, Really like letting me think that, like you are something special. You don't need to be in that situation. And so I did work full time. I waited until my kids were a little bit older, and then I enrolled back at Ivy Tech as in the human service program. And I remember sitting in classes, and I remember like the MSW students coming in, and I would think, I'm never going to get there. It's not in the cards for me. I'm never going to get to that point. And I went through the program. I graduated. I had a great professor that encourages everybody, which is Professor Don Spears. And he encourages everyone. And he was my encouragement throughout the whole program. And I always remember every time we were in his class, we would talk about like social work, and you really need to keep going. You really need to keep going. I'm like, what is that? Like I knew what social work was, but I didn't know like how I would even transfer for, even if it would work for me or if I could even do it. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, but my confidence started with him. And it started at Ivy Tech. So I went on, I graduated. I waited until my kids were older, so they were able to be at home. My son was 16, so he was able to stay at home with my daughter. So that's how I was able to actually go and not pay for daycare, pay for extra babysitters that I didn't have money for. So I transferred to IAUN and got my bachelor's and went on to grad school also at IUN and got my master's. So that's how that all played out, and I'm thankful that it did, because I'm in a much better place now than I was definitely 10 years ago. So
Good. That is a very inspiring story. And I appreciate the kind words that you shared. And, I do try to be supportive of my students because people who go into this line of work or study, they do it because they're special people and they have something to give. And sometimes we lose sight of the ultimate goal because of short-term issues, like a lack of
absolutely.
confidence or
Mhm.
other types of resources. And it says a lot about you too that you came back 3 times. You
Yep,
never gave up. And I think a real important thing for anyone who's considering working on a degree is grit, just refusing to give up. And
yes,
that definitely is something that you could put on your business card. Racheal,
absolutely.
MSW, I've got grit.
Yep, exactly. Third time's a charm.
That's right. That's right. So, in the story that you just shared with us, um, you had a number of factors that you brought up that were potential barriers. If you had to pick one or two, what would you say are the biggest barriers that you had to overcome in order to complete?
I think the very first one was childcare. I think that's a huge deal for single parents going back to school, even going back to work. Like trying school, when you have to take care of your family first, and you don't have like that, even people that do have like that extra income coming in and they do have that husband, it's hard for them. So having, like one parent having to, like provide, and not even like all the time financially, like that one parent has to be the one that takes their kids to the doctor, or shows up for appointments or shows up for school stuff and things like that. I just think that like childcare, as far as finding the right people to take care of your kids just to work, is a huge barrier, let alone going back to school. So like I think that's why we kind of like put it off for so long, just because we're like, we can't pay for, you know, daycare, childcare, things like that to go to work. How are we going to pay for it to go to college? So like having, adequate daycare or childcare or somebody that you trust so that way you can go back to school nights or days or wherever you're planning on going. That was a huge thing for me.
Absolutely. And when my wife and I were going to college and graduate school, we had our son who was growing up, and we had the exact same thing. Um, the places that we could afford to take him to, we were very uncomfortable leaving
Yeah.
him there, and it was in the back all the time of our minds, and frequently distracting in the front of our minds.
Yes.
And the places that you would feel really good about leaving your kiddo, they cost more than the college bill is. And that's
Hmm.
literally true. And especially when the younger they are, the more expensive it is, because until
Yes.
they get in diapers, or out of diapers, you're paying a fortune for their
Oh, yeah.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's something, it's not just a Valparaiso issue. This is a national issue that you hear people talk about all the time. And most wealthy countries who are comparable to us provide at least subsidized childcare, if not free. And in my opinion, I think that it much more than pays for itself
Yeah.
for the society, because we wouldn't have, I mean, think about the number of people who are not going to college,
Hmm.
who, if they were able to build that confidence and not have that worry distracting them,
Hmm.
how much they would be able to contribute. And I think a lot of times too, and I'm a first generation college student, like most students at Ivy Tech are. And even if you're fortunate enough to have a parent around who can watch, the grandchildren, they, because they didn't go to college, they underestimate the amount of time it takes. It's not just when you're in the classroom,
Yeah.
because really to be uh, very successful and master your subject, it takes 2 to 3 hours of time away from the classroom for every
Mhm.
hour in the classroom.
Yeah.
And, if you can get a family member to help you out with that, that's great. But childcare, I mean, if you had to pay somebody for all of that time too.
Yeah. It's amazing how much that can it really is. And I don't think people realize that, like unless you do utilize like daycare or childcare or something like that, because that can rack up to be like a $500 bill for the month just for one child. Thankfully, mine were 5 years apart, so I kind of didn't have them both in daycare at the same time, but it can be really expensive. And you're right, like having that worry, because there were a couple of places that we, sought out for our, like my daughter and my son. And when I left them the first time, I didn't feel comfortable, like, and that was the whole thing I thought about the whole time. So not having to have that worry would be amazing too, just because that's a huge thing. That, I mean, our kids are our number one priority, so college doesn't really fit in there if you're not, trusting whoever it is that you're leaving your kids with. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's something, those of you who are watching and considering a potential career in human services and social working, you can work both on the micro level, which is giving, providing therapy and case management and so forth, or you can work on the macro level, which is working on legislation, trying to get some institutions in place where we're providing childcare so that people can get through college. So you're going to see, because I'm going to point out throughout these episodes, different ways in which a human services professional can assist in whatever issue that we're talking about.
Mhm.
But certainly in my case and in your case, having some help with childcare would have made a huge difference.
Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
all right. So, childcare was your largest barrier, and you told us how you overcame that. You were fortunate in that your kids were 5 years apart. A
Yes.
lot of people, they start their family and they'll have two or three kids, and they're maybe a year or a year and a half between each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more challenging than it was for you or for me, who only has one child. So they really have it rough. And colleges struggle as well because we've had some regional universities that had university sponsored daycare centers, and they've
Um,
closed them.
yeah.
And that really kind of surprised me when that's happened because it
Yeah.
seems like exactly what we need.
What?
But
Yes.
budget
Yep.
budget crunches, and sometimes they have to cut things that they don't want to cut. Okay, so what kept you going when it would have been easiest for you to quit? And that can be any point from the first time you came to Ivy Tech to finishing your MSW. What was it that really nudged you along to continue?
I think the main two things, which we've been talking about the whole time, are my
Mhm.
kids. Like every time I wanted to quit or give up, I wanted to be that role model for them. I wanted to be the example that, look, mom went back to school. Mom can do it. I can do it. Like I wanted to be that person that they look at, and they have actually shown me that and have said to me like how proud of me they are, and how much, like, you really did a great job, mom. You kept going even when things got hard, because things did get a little difficult there, especially toward the last couple of years of grad school, just because grad school's intense and it can get overwhelming. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of papers, there's a lot of everything. And there are days that my cohort and I would talk and we'd be like, that's it, we're just going to quit and we're going to be done. And we all talked each other out of it. So I think they played a huge role in it too at the end. And I think I knew I would never quit, just because once you start and once you graduate, like with the human service degree, that's what started it for me. Like that's where my confidence started. Like I am smart. I can make a difference. I am going to keep going. So I don't think that it was even a choice at that point anymore. Like I was going to do it no matter what. So I think looking at my kids and having them root me on and knowing that I was setting that example for them, that's what kept me going.
Yes, and a lot of parents, while they're going through the process, looking at, and this is a really common thing because you see and feel what's going on right now,
Mhm.
and to be successful and to really make a jump in your standard of living and the trajectory of your children's lives, you have to be able, you hate to have to do it, but you do have to make sacrifices,
Mhm.
short-term sacrifices for long-term gains.
Yes.
And parents, myself included, we feel guilty while we're going to school because we think I should be helping my kiddo with homework, or we should be going to the park, and they're
Yep.
spending time, with my parents, and I love my parents, but I want to be parenting my children. But you did a beautiful job of explaining how you were able to get through that, and getting your master's degree, you've inspired your children, and that's going to have a trickle down effect because you're, as first generation students like us,
Mhm.
it kind of, at least for your kind of branch in the family, you've made a turn.
Yeah.
So, in improving our own lives through education, we can be changing a whole section of the family tree in the future.
Mhm.
And it's
For sure.
definitely well worth it, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so glad that I'm at this point. Like it is, it's, I don't know. I don't even know the word for it. Like it's very, I have like a weight lifted off, like, oh my gosh, I did it. I did it and I didn't quit. And I, like you said, there are sacrifices. There were times I couldn't go to games that my kids had in middle school. And, I missed a couple of things here and there, but I always had that conversation with them and told them, like this is, I'm not missing it, to, go off and do something on my own. I'm missing it so that way I can have a better future and you guys can reap benefits from that. Just, like I want to be that parent that can take care of myself to where my kids don't feel like I'm gonna have to take care of mom, when she's older because, she doesn't have all the benefits that she could have had, finishing school. So you're right. It does take some getting used to, and that guilt really can eat at you, but it is so worth it at the end, and it is short term. Like it's not something that is going to last forever. And I did keep telling myself that, like, this is not something that's going to last forever. These feelings aren't going to last forever. I'm not going to be in school forever. So
Mhm.
it was well worth it.
Absolutely. And I think you hit upon a really important point, and I think that it was very well done, where you said that you would have to miss games or activities for your children, and you made sure that you sat them down and explained it's not because I don't want to be there, because I do.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to be there because I'm doing this for all of us. And I think that that is something that your kids are probably always going to remember. And I think it's great advice for anybody who's watching.
Yeah.
And I also really apprecited what you shared about how even in graduate school, so somebody who may be considering coming to Ivy Tech for their associate degree, we did have guest speakers, as Racheal was alluding to before. We'd have graduate students come in and talk about the opportunities, and that's meant to inspire and not intimidate, but there was probably a bit of both that was going
Mhm.
on with that. And when you were in graduate school, it wasn't just you, it was the whole cohort that had doubts. And uh, fortunately, you all took turns having your freakouts so that the rest of you could talk you through it.
Definitely. We did, definitely. And like I know like when you start college, when you first start, especially like starting at with associates, and I know you reiterate this all the time with your students, like get familiar with your cohort because they're going to be coming with you along the way and you guys are going to get close. And you were completely right, because I've had some of the same friends that I started at Ivy Tech with and we all went to IUN. I've made some new friends along the way, but we all stuck by each other when we needed it. So you definitely need to get familiar with people in your program and connect those bonds, and because they're going to help you out, they're going to keep you going. So
Yeah, on two levels, that's important. First, in getting each other through the next degrees that you're working on, but you're also, when you get your positions and you're working
yes,
in the agencies, your colleagues, and you're going to be making referrals to each other.
yes.
And uh, right, Racheal and I, we've known each other for a very long time, and she was kind enough to invite me to her hooding ceremony for her MSW, which just really made me so proud. And while I was there, how many people graduated with the MSW? It was about 20, 25, something like that.
Yeah, maybe close to 30 something. This is one of the larger cohorts.
Yeah.
I think that they had, just because, you don't always have to do all of your classes and internships all at once. You can do all classes and internships. So we had like all different kinds of people from all of that, like people that were just doing internships and graduating at that time. So it was kind of a large cohort.
Yeah. And so of 25 to 30 in the cohort, what was a wonderful surprise to me, I went there to celebrate and encourage Racheal. And I think it was five out of that cohort that earned their MSW. They started here.
Yep.
And that just really, really made me, oh, it just totally made my day. So it
Yeah.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I hope that that can provide some inspiration for those of you who are watching. And know that whatever doubts you have, whether it's going to college or if you're not going to college and going to work or whatever your situation is, everybody else may appear to you as though they're very confident and you only see the outside and
Hmm.
you don't see what they're feeling on the inside, and they're just as stressed and overwhelmed and sometimes scared as you are. But if you don't form these cohorts, you think that you're the only one who has doubts or that you're this close to throwing in the towel. And my wife and I were both college faculty, and we have both said we're so lucky that we were married and we went through that process together. And we were lucky, like Racheal, uh, we didn't both have breakdowns at the same time. So we we were lucky enough that we took turns freaking out and
Yeah.
talked the other one through. So keep that in mind and know that you are definitely not the only person who has doubts and frustrations. And if you've got that group that you get close to and you share because you've been together for years,
Yeah.
they don't feel as though I can't be vulnerable because people are going to think I don't have what it takes. And it's very therapeutic to hear from each other, this is freaking me out, or I don't have child, because you can even barter things. I've
Yes.
known students who've taken turns watching each other's kids so that they could work on papers, and they've carpooled because it's expensive in commuter colleges to get to class or to get to internship. So
Yeah.
count
That's
on
what I
the
was gonna
people
say too.
around you.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. If I can interject, I was
Sure.
gonna also say that as far as like when you're going through college too, your outside family and friends, they don't know what you're going through. They just know what you tell them. So when you connect with people and make form these bonds with people, not only are you going through the same thing that they are, so like you can have those freak out sessions and they're going to totally understand because they're going right through it with you, as and you can also meet other single parents that are doing the same thing you are, and like you said, Professor Spears, like we can kind of get together and be like, hey, I want to work on this paper. Can you watch, so and so? Can you keep an eye? Or you can get all of your kids together and they can go out, go over and play or whatever, and then you guys can work on homework together. Like there's so much that you can gain out of making those connections with people instead of trying to do it all by yourself, because sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do because you're already doing it by yourself, because your family and friends, while they might be supportive, they don't understand what it's like unless they've went through it themselves. But even at that point, it's been years and years, like if your parents have went through it too, it's been
Mhm.
years. Things are different, times have changed, so it is important to have those connections.
Yeah, and I like the point that you made there very well about how if you, especially for first generation, parents just have they and it's simply because they've never been through it. They
Hmm.
don't get how stressful and challenging it is. And even when I became a faculty member, I had family members who would ask me, "So, how many classes are you teaching?" And I would tell them, and they'd say, "Boy, have you got a cushy job, you know?" And I'm
Hmm.
up at 2 o'clock grading papers and getting ready for the next day. And they don't mean anything by it. They
Hmm.
just equate when you're in the classroom and think that
Yes.
that's what it takes. And it's so much more than that.
Yes, definitely.
And the advice that you can get and the guidance if you're not a first generation. So when you go to school, you are doing it for yourself, but Rachel's kids and my son are going to have it so much easier than we did because we're going to be more understanding and recognize the signs of their freakouts too.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it definitely does affect much more than just the student, your whole social system that you're close to.
Yes,
Everybody's life changes when you get your college education.
definitely.
Okay, as a community, and here I know that you don't have a dump truck full of money that you could, just do whatever you wanted to. But if you were advocating at a community level for some type of support for college students, what do you think would be the most useful change or resource that would help, particularly single parents like you were, to achieve their dreams?
I think it's kind of one, they kind of go hand in hand, just in my opinion. But I think having the childcare, like having affordable childcare, whether it's like you said, like the subsidized childcare or free. I think that it would be beneficial. I know that there are lots of obstacles when it comes to, like having childcare on campus, but I think that it would be so beneficial because not only are people's children like they're on campus with them while they're in classes, so they know that they're safe and they're there, they're not, in another external place, and it also gives them the peace of mind that like I'm not paying an arm and a leg to do this, and my kid is right there, that if I have multiple classes I can go down and check on them and make sure that they're okay. I mean, even if it's just the actual childcare and we're bringing in the food, like the food for the kids, the diapers, the baby wipes, everything that they need, and just having, like maybe volunteers or something like that. I know that it's been done in the past, it doesn't really work, but maybe to try to find a way to make it work.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think that we definitely need some type of significant overhaul of
Hmm.
our child care system in the country because when it costs more for your kid to go to the local uh, education-based preschool and daycare rather than we're just going to keep them busy or play Barney all day,
Yeah.
someplace that they're really getting enriched. There's something wrong when that costs more than it does for you to go to college or university. And
Yes.
that's just for your expenses at a commuter college. We're
Hmm.
not talking about us going away to a main campus.
Yes.
That just does not work.
Doesn't. No. And I think support groups for single parents too, because we can get ideas from other parents like, hey, I've tried this and this seems to work, or I've done this when I need to study and this seems to work. So like kind of like bouncing ideas off of each other. I think like having that support group for students too, just to have like peace of mind that, other people are going through and struggling too, and this is how we can kind of combat that.
I think that's an excellent idea. And I'm writing that one down because that's something that I can get us working a little more formally on here. Because I think getting parents to provide support for each other, that would be one thing that I would encourage. And then another thing that I'm going to try to do more formally, but students can do it informally on their own, but it's easier when somebody's heading it up. But uh, find yourself a mentor. I
Hmm.
can't stress too much how important mentorship is. It can be a faculty member, or it could be your academic advisor, or it could be uh, even, if here at the community college, where a lot of students uh, stop is between the first and second year. And if we were to put together, and I really want to do this, some type of a system where second year students who are getting close to finishing get introduced to first year students so that they can provide support to each other. I think that that's important too.
It
So,
is. Yeah.
and they don't even have to be of the same major, just understanding the challenges and providing support to each other.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think that's such a good idea too.
Yes, well, it was your idea and I'm stealing it and writing it down.
That's okay. Collaboration. We
That's
learn
right. That's
that.
right. But all of you watching, always cite your sources.
That's right.
Okay, so the last question that I have for you is, what advice would you have for the many people who are trying to balance everything? And I know that you know what I mean by everything: work, family, school, having a social life. I mean, it's almost like that becomes a luxury, going out with your friends, but it's really a necessity.
Yes.
But balancing all of that and creating a better future for yourself and your children, because that's your ultimate goal. So, what would be your advice that you would give to somebody who's considering starting college, or they're just starting, they're in their first year? What would you say to them?
I have quite a few things, only like learning from experience as well. I think getting a planner is like I have stressed that to all of my clients in the past. Planners, planners, planners. I've had students that have taken me up on that and I love it. And I feel like it really saved my life. I did not use it when I was getting my associates, and even not so much my first year of undergrad. It was my second year of undergrad that I was like, that's it. And scheduling time for self-care, because you can't keep going unless you take care of yourself. So you have to be able to take care of yourself, whether that's taking a hot bath once an evening with candles or whatever, or like you said, going out with friends. Like that can be a release, and that can be something that you do to take care of yourself. Getting enough sleep. I mean, that seems like like a no-brainer, but when you've got all these things going on, sleep is the last thing we think of. So making sure you get adequate sleep, taking time to just do something for yourself, and asking for help. Asking for help is a huge thing too. We're not superhuman. We can't do everything ourselves. And if you have a couple of people in your life that you can ask for help, whether it be as a professor that you have, or, like a family member or another person in your cohort, asking for help when you need it, because it's everyone has to ask for help at some point. So
That I love all of the advice that you gave, but I think more than all of them, that last point I think is crucial, because here at our college and most regional universities as well, the greatest number of people in the student body are first generation, and you have no idea of the supports that are available to you.
yeah.
And if the people who do have the knowledge of that don't know that that's what you need, you're going to do without.
Right.
So that was just so well said about don't feel embarrassed about saying to whoever your trusted person at the college or university is, I'm struggling with this. Do you have any suggestions? Because we haven't mentioned it yet, but when Racheal was doing her second clinical for her MSW, she was our campus's life coach. So she was the person that we would direct students to, where there was confidentiality. If they didn't want something said to their professor, it wasn't said to their professor, and she was able to give advice as far as, self-care, of course, but make referrals for mental health concerns, because we find in the general population, so it's certainly the case with college students too, anxiety and depression is off the charts. And
Yes.
that's something that you can get help for. And it doesn't always have to involve taking medication
Mhm.
or uh, paying for a therapist that you can't afford, even though they would be very helpful to you.
Mhm.
You might find, if you ask, and certainly if you come to our campus, we've been fortunate enough that we've had wonderful life coaches, and they can help teach you stress relief, identifying when you're getting really stressed so that you can start focusing on that sooner before
Mhm.
because any problem in any aspect of your life, the sooner you address it, the easier it is to fix it.
Right.
You'd rather fix a problem this big than one that big. So
Yeah.
being very self-aware is important. And here at the Valparaiso campus, we've got this really cool new resource for students because of are having identified anxiety and stress as being such a problem. We have got a relaxation and meditation room that's available. And if you're a registered student, it's on the second floor in the library. It's got very dim, indirect lighting. It's quiet. They have all sorts of things. If you want white noise, you can put that on softly. If you want the sound of waterfall, not Niagara Falls, because that's not relaxing, but a little trickle of a waterfall, they've got that too. And then there's also a section that's partitioned off by a screen for people who want to pray or have some type of if they want to meditate in privacy, they can go there, and it's free to those who are students. So we've got that. And then another thing is we've got and this is very underutilized, but I think it's important. We've got a fitness facility here too. So one of the best ways to get through stress is exercise.
Yep.
Because, when my son went away to school, one of the things that the university told us about is the freshman 15. And
Yeah.
they said that's where, when kids come for their first year, and first of all, they have a little more freedom, but then they're stressed too, so they stress eat, and they say you put on 15
Gain 15
pounds.
pounds.
Yes.
Oh,
So, taking care of yourself, staying healthy, it gets the stress out of you by exercising at your level of ability. And it's a no judgment zone. Nobody's going to be there giving you a hard time if you're not already, in perfect shape. And exercising releases endorphins.
mhm.
And that too, it's like a shot of medication.
Yep.
Endorphins are the chemicals that help the body. You some of you may have heard of, I'm not a runner, believe me, but you may have heard of the runner's high.
Yeah.
And that's when they've pushed themselves to the point where a flood of dopamine gets released into the body, and it's a bit of a high that they feel,
Mhm.
and they get their second wind, and they're able to continue beyond where they thought that they could.
Yeah.
So it may sound cliche, when you hear people talk self-care, but it's said, so it's repeated so much because it's true.
Mhm. It's important.
So don't be afraid to make yourself vulnerable by opening up to somebody that you trust at the college.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
never going to be held against you. And that is probably going to be the biggest factor between those who finish and those who don't.
Right?
And even financially, people tend to think right off about student loans. You hear about
Mhm.
those all the time. And the college is saying to faculty every semester, we've got scholarships and we've
Right.
got grants. It's free money. They don't have to pay it back. And I want to award the money, but if people don't apply, they can't get it.
Yeah.
So if you run into financial issues, which most college students do, make sure that you reach out to somebody, our
Mhm.
life coach, or to your faculty advisor or your academic advisor, and ask them about that, because there's a lot of stuff that's available that, unfortunately, if you put it in a book, it would be this huge book. But if you
Yeah.
ask the right people, many times they know off the top of their head, and they'll
Yeah.
say, here's what you got to do.
Yep. That is true. I had a couple of clients ask me about like grants or something that they could apply for that could help them. So I didn't know at the time, so I did some research and asked, asked
Mhm.
around, researched the, like Googled things like that, and I found quite a few that they were able to use. So I don't know if they actually like went through and did it, but I do know that I had given them a couple resources regarding those, and they were like, "Wow, I didn't even know about these." So
Uh-huh.
I said, "And I didn't either." So this is, new for me too. So there are so many grants and scholarships out there that you probably don't even know about that you can look for and apply to.
Absolutely. And anybody who's in school, if you're feeling as though you're just running out of gas and you're running out of money and you're just gonna give up, do yourself a favor. Don't just disappear.
Yes.
Reach out, see what there is available. You may be quite surprised,
Mhm.
but if you don't reach out to, the trusted faculty member or the life coach, you're not going to get that. And if you quit without completing and you've taken out student loans, those follow you.
Yes.
So you not only don't have a degree, but now you owe money that you
Yeah.
didn't know before. So you're kind of worse off than if you
So,
hadn't gone. So
yes.
take advantage of everything that you possibly can. And I'd like to just finish by saying that my hat's off to single parents who go to school, they work full time, they go to school full time, they take care of their kids. And so many times I find that those are the students that are excelling in class simply because, and I think they're doing it, it's like it's a mission for their kids,
Yep.
and I have so much respect for that because when I was in school, I didn't have any children, and just trying to empathize with some of you all and what you do and how you can not only finish, but in many cases excel. I really, really respect that. So my hat's off to you, Racheal, and anybody else who is considering it, doing it, or they have already finished.
Yep.
It's doable, but maybe through our conversations in the podcasts here, maybe we'll come up with some solutions. And, being that we're focused on Porter County, uh, we have access to officials in town, and
Yes.
you never know. So we've identified some problems, and maybe carrying those forward to some future guests, we can make a change and help people make some real improvements in their lives and the lives of the rest of the family that follows along in their footsteps.
That's true. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it and the opportunity to be able to talk about it. So thank
Oh,
you.
I'm thrilled that you were a guest. I appreciate it. So, everybody, make sure that you remember the advice that was given and the very inspiring story that Racheal told. She worked herself with help, but she did an awful lot. You work hard even when you get a lot of help, but she went from being a single mother in Section 8 housing to now having her master's in social work and starting her career. And would can we finish with you sharing with everybody what your ultimate goal is with your MSW?
Sure. My ultimate goal is to get my LCSW, which is licensed clinical social worker, and I want to be a therapist and provide, help for people who are struggling with mental health and addiction issues.
And we have such a huge need for that, not just here, but everywhere. So I'm grateful that you went and have received the training. And for those of you watching, you can start here at Ivy Tech and you can follow the same path and save some money for in your first 2 years.
Yes,
And, if I can be so bold, I think we've got a pretty good human services program here. And
absolutely.
those who transfer, they tend to do quite well. So
Yes,
uh, don't think that community college is a fallback. You know, it should be among your first choices.
I was not
So,
disappointed. I loved it there. It was the best experience I've had going to school, and I was quite scared when I started, and it was not anything as scary as I thought it was going to be. And I learned so much. I learned so much more than a lot of my cohort, had went in and discussed and said, I didn't really learn about that stuff. I'm like, but I did. So I was thankful for all of that. I learned so much, and I'm so grateful for Ivy Tech and to Professor Spears for all of everything that they gave me, and I learned going to school there. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, this is the end of our first full episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation today. If you did, please like and subscribe